Alright, hello, welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to tell you what the basics are to making a translation mod for a game that was created in GameMaker. The first thing that you're going to want to do is to start modifying the font to support characters that are specific to your language. The English language only contains 26 letters, as well as the 10 Arabic digits and various symbols. However, it is likely that you will need to add more, so I'm going to cover the process now. The first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to find the font that you're going to edit in Undertale Mod Tool. This is an example of a font in Undertale Mod Tool. Fonts in GameMaker games are stored as images, where each letter is associated with a specific position and size on this image. There are some other values associated with them as well, like shift and offset, but these are not very important. It is fine to get these slightly wrong. The most important value is char. Char represents the value numerically of the character that is being represented. If you are to look up an ASCII table or a Unicode table, as I have brought up in this window, that is actually what the value of char corresponds to. So for example, lowercase g has a decimal value of 103. If we look at the 103 character in this table, we can see that it's supposed to have a position of 2 and 2 at the top left of the image. As we can see, that character is also a lowercase g. This is important because this is how it matches the message to the individual letters that it needs to draw. So it is important that you get this value correctly. In order to add new characters, first you must modify the image being used for the font. To do this, you will need to go to find the texture that is being used, export it, save it somewhere easy to remember, and just click that save button. And now that will be on my desktop. Here it is. You can see this is actually quite hard to read, so in a tool like Paint.net, which is what I prefer to use for these sorts of tasks, it helps to add a second layer behind it with a dark background. It is important that you remove this layer before you export this back into your game, or else this background will always be there no matter where the text is rendering. This can cause issues. So again, it should have a transparent background when it's going back into the game. Now let us add a new character. We'll pick one out of our Unicode list. There are plenty to choose from. I think I'll add an accented A very quickly. It might be helpful to first actually determine the position of the original character I'm modifying. In this case, decimal 97. Its position is 1051 and its size is 613. XY width and height. Now that we have drawn our character, we save the image. As I said, it is necessary to make sure that the background is transparent when we are saving. Next, we will need to import it back into Undertale Mod Tool. We do this by clicking Import, and then by selecting our modified image file. It is important to note that changing the size of this image file may cause issues. Try to keep it the same size for simplicity. If not, you can look at my video on import scripts to find some methods for importing the textures when you change their size. Next, we will want to add the glyph that represents our new character. Our existing font only supports characters 32 through 127, but our character falls outside of that range. We must first update the range to match what we have created. The accented A I've created has a decimal value of 225, So our upper limit must include that. Next we will add our glyph. It is important that the value in char matches the decimal value associated with the Unicode character. Next we will add the position and size that we gave it when we created it. In this case, it covers this rectangle at 0, 115 with a size of 6 by 13. The shift value represents how much to shift the cursor after drawing this character. For a character of size 6, it is best to shift it 7 pixels so that it will create a small space. Offset for most characters will be 0. If you've created your characters out of order, it is wise to click this button labeled Sort Glyphs. In my case, it makes no changes because my glyphs are already in the correct order, but they should be ordered so that the lowest value of char is on the top and the highest is on the bottom. Now we'll move to modifying sprites. Many games have sprites which contain text in them instead of drawing from the font directly. For example, we might look at the logo of the game. If we export this sprite, we see that it is just a simple image. Again, like before, it has a transparent background, so we'll put a layer behind it to increase visibility. And of course, all you would need to do to modify this image is to simply create a new image which matches the translation. There isn't a font here, so you will have to edit the pixels directly. After you do that, you would simply save this. And afterwards, you would re-import it by going to the texture page item and then importing the image back in. Although I did not make any changes, if I had, they would be remembered when I did so. Next, we will discuss how to add text in foreign languages to the game using the existing text as a base. First, we will find an example of in-game text being used. Here we can see an example of text being used in the game. In this case, the text is attached to an object's event, but text can be placed in many places. For example, text can be obtained by reading an external file, such as a lang file. This is the case with our game, Deltarune. If I can open the directory for Deltarune very quickly, you can see that there is a folder called lang, which is an abbreviation for the word language. Anyways, if you wish to edit a lang file, usually it is as straightforward as it is to edit the text in code. In the case of Deltarune, both methods are used in different locations. For Chapter 1, all text is stored in lang files, both in English and in Japanese. For Chapter 2, English text is stored in code, and Japanese is stored in a lang file to improve readability. Editing is the same in either case. To edit a string, you merely type it out in the language that you desire. It is important to understand that some games have scripting languages built into their dialogue. Deltarune is no exception. Some characters, like these, this slash and this %sign, are not being used as text that is actually drawn, but are used to indicate behaviors that the game should perform when drawing the text. Thus, it is important to make sure that you do not use these as ordinary text, or it may cause errors in the game's performance. To add characters that don't already exist in the language, it is usually enough to simply copy-paste them. For example, if we take this and we copy it into the string, it will display as normal. There may be some limitations to this method, but I have yet to discover them. And as you can see, adding a character with a accent was quite simple. Now, of course, I actually lost a few things in that cut. It turns out that that text was actually being called from the lang file, and that this piece of code I have up is kind of redundant and not actually what is being used. I apologize. That's usually not going to be your issue, but I figure I should probably give that information in case anybody tries to replicate my exact steps. Anyways, this is really all you need to know about how to get started with adding translations. Most of the rest is fairly self-explanatory. Now, of course, you will have to edit code if you're doing things like changing the number of text boxes, and usually the best method to do that is trial and error. Every game has different systems, but your best bet is going to be just seeing how they did it in the original game and trying your best to replicate that. Anyways, I hope that tutorial could be some help to you. I know it's a slightly complicated process, but hopefully you guys can wrap your heads around everything. If not, you can always come to the Discord for Undertale mod tool and ask me some questions there, and hopefully I'll be able to give you some better answers. I'll put a link to that in the description. Have a wonderful day.